You are now listening to the Building Her Dream podcast, where we have inspiring conversations with introverted women entrepreneurs who are building their dream lives and businesses on their own terms. Hosted by business operations strategist, author, and the founder of Building Her Dream, Shayla Burton. To learn more about this podcast and our magazine, visit www.buildingherdream.com. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the Building Her Dream podcast. I'm your host and lifelong introvert, Shayla Burton, and I'm so excited to chat with today's guest. She is Carrie Graham, an adult learning strategist all the way from North Carolina. Carrie, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Shayla. Thank you so much for having me. One introvert to another, I'm I'm excited to have a chat.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm so glad to talk with you. Now, I always like to start off with a fun question. So,
Mhm.
if you could wake up tomorrow and have the perfect dream life, what would that look like for you?
Oh my goodness. Thank you for the moment to dream out loud. I appreciate it. I have always wanted to travel the world, and the way that I would want to do that is to spend about 3 months in each location so that I can immerse myself in the culture, the food, absolutely, and the people, and also give back to that community, right? So instead of me simply implanting myself and taking, but rather be of service to them in whatever capacity is meaningful to them. And then come home. And for me, home is surrounding myself with my family, loved ones, those that really understand me, and then go back out and do it again for another 3 months. Like that would be an absolute dream for me.
Wow, that sounds beautiful. So, where would you spend the first 3 months? Where would you want to go?
I don't know about that because I have been blessed to have traveled internationally before. So I don't know if I'd want to start with something familiar and then go someplace that I've never been, or start with a place that I've never been. Um,
Mm, that's a
but
good.
it's something I've always dreamt. I've dreamt it that even as a kid, if I'm being honest, like it always comes up when I'm daydreaming.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I definitely want to do more traveling. And 3 months sounds like a really good time because typically we just go for, like a week or something, and you don't really get to experience their life and their way of living. So going for a few months would be like awesome.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm a foodie. I love to eat and try
Mm-hmm.
new things. And so,
Okay.
when you're go like you said, when you go on vacation, you might, take in the local cuisine, but is it really the local cuisine? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, is it
Mm-hmm.
really steeped in culture and someone's grandma's cooking it for you with all the love?
Right.
So that's the part that just I get so excited about when I dream about it. And my prayer is that soon it is my lifestyle.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It definitely will be because you're doing amazing work right now that will help you get to that dream life. So why don't you tell us a bit about the work that you do?
Yeah, well, thank you for asking. I have leveraged almost 30 years of experience working in training and development, and this PhD that I have in adult learning. And so my goal and my passion is to support businesses that don't have a dedicated training team, and they are committed to the people they serve. And so they want to provide an excellent training experience, whether it's onboarding, group coaching, and they don't know how. So they invite me in, and I do consider it to be an invitation to be a part of someone's business on a project. And I go in and make some observations and some recommendations, and we work together to make improvements. And thankfully, I can say, or proudly, I can say, all my clients have been happy with the result as in terms of working with me and improving their training program. So it's been amazing. It's been amazing.
Yeah, and that's really great work that you do because I've worked with a lot of companies either, as an employee or also as an entrepreneur. I've partnered with them and their training is very lacking. They it's lacking, it's non-existent. And so they need someone like you to come in and get them together so that they'll have employees who can, learn their roles and learn the company well, and then also feel comfortable enough to want to stick around. But a lot of times it's you just get thrown into your job and there's so much confusion and questions, and it's like, ugh, I don't, this place is so disorganized. Do I really want to be here? So,
Yeah, and that's the sad part. I always tell my clients that when you are developing a program of any sort, the reality is it's not about you and it's not about your content. It's about the end user. It's about that employee. It's about that client who has to go through that training. Can they understand it? Do they see themselves? Does it resonate with that, with the content? And so it's not simply a matter of putting information together and expecting people to figure it out on their own. When it's done well, there
mhm.
is a guided process in learning.
I love that. I love
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah. So this podcast is all about um building our dreams, but also at doing it while also being an introvert. And I was just wondering, do you can you remember when you like first realized that you were an introvert? Because I'm trying to think back, like when I was growing up, I had never even heard that word.
Yeah.
I want to say I didn't start hearing about it until like I was in my 20s. So yeah, do you remember? But I knew something was different about me.
Yeah.
Different within my family. Like I was just the different person. So I was just wondering, like, when did you first realize that you were introverted?
Yeah, I've never thought of that before, but to your point, I would have to say it also was probably in my 20s. I grew up as an only child for 13 years. So I have a younger sister who's 13 years younger than me. So,
Mm-hmm.
as the introvert, the only child, for a period there, it was sort of like, oh, she's just quiet because she doesn't, have,
Yeah.
people in the house to play with. And then when I went to school, it was it was truly she's so quiet, right? Like that was the label that I wore. Um, it was from others, and it was also by my family is, well, Carrie's just quiet, she's fine, and it wasn't until when I was in college that I recognize this agitation of why won't they just stop talking, right? Like
Yeah.
thinking of the extroverts, right? Like, why don't
Right.
they just stop talking? Why don't they give space to others, meaning myself? Um, but yeah, I don't think the language of introvert and extrovert um came to me until I was in my 20s and working and trying to navigate the work world and being successful. I was started my career in a very small healthcare industry. And so, well, in athletic training. And I worked in Division 1 athletics, and I had high dreams and I wanted to be on a certain path. but I struggled to see it happening as someone who's quiet. You know, you're high in this environment that's high stress, male dominated at that time. And so finding my voice it was quite a challenge.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that. I was also labeled the quiet child. People would always ask me, "Do you talk?" And I'm like, "That is a dumb question because I'm clearly talking to you right now." Yeah, and people would also say to me, like, "Why don't you talk more?" And I would be thinking, "Why don't you stop talking?" Like, please, like, we don't want to hear you. But yeah, so that's something that I remember. But it sounds like your family were, very supportive, or your parents were very supportive
Yeah.
um to you, and that's really great.
Yeah, yeah. Thankfully, I all have always had a supportive family and like my cousins, I didn't grow up near my cousins. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but in the summers when we got together, it was still like, oh, care they were protective, when
Mm-hmm.
their friends were around, they were protective of me. But there's something about people who know you, like truly
Yeah.
know you, loved ones, who they're like, Carrie, you want to say something, or they'll pull it out,
Mm-hmm.
and they always gave me space. All of my family always gave me space to be quiet, to play by myself, to have my own thoughts and ideas. And for that, I'm forever grateful. Shayla, let me just take a moment to say thank you. You got me thinking about some things I haven't thought about either ever or for decades. So thank you for this conversation.
Oh no, you're welcome. You're welcome. It's something that I've been thinking about lately. Well, I'll say for the past decade, as I've just grown and really got more comfortable with myself and liking myself and my personality. Because when I was younger, it I didn't really like myself. I wish I was someone else, but it was because other people were telling me that I should be like other people. I should speak more. I should do. And so, over the past as an adult and just growing and learning about myself and why I do the things that I do, or why do I think the things that I do. And also recognizing that my personality is a gift, because it definitely has helped me in life. So yeah, it's just been something that I've been thinking about myself, and so it's been great to have conversations with people like you to just learn about your experiences as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. So now what inspired you to start your own business?
I would say it was out of necessity, honestly. So I believe in telling the truth, full
Yes.
transparency. And so I was working as a faculty member, so as a university professor, and in 2019, the decision was to close my academic program. And so in 2020, at the end of the school year, I ultimately was laid off. And, in the midst of all of the global shutdowns, no one was hiring.
Mm,
Um, and I remember sitting at my dining room table thinking, what am I going to do? What my interest in healthcare, that's what I was teaching as a professor, had pretty much run its course for
mm,
25 years. And I had this PhD, relatively new PhD in adult learning. And I thought, this is like this passion about adults and the workplace learning experiences it's really growing and I want to explore it. And I remember thinking, I don't ever want to sit through a bad training ever again in my life. And that's what did it. That's what did it. I started thinking about all the times, the years that I had to do just that, sit through trainings that were not informative. They didn't help me improve my skill set. And that was a shared experience. So it was, COVID was the height of COVID. There were a lot of lives lost, and I honor that. But for me, it was actually an opportunity to grow and explore some things that I probably wouldn't have otherwise.
That makes sense. It's interesting that you say you start your business out of necessity because a lot of people think that, oh, you know, becoming an entrepreneur is, very risky because you're leaving a stable career, but you've been laid off. I was laid off for the fourth time when I
Wow.
decided to start my business because working for corporate was so unstable for me. So I'm like, let me start a business so that I can, be responsible for my own financial situation and not rely on these companies. So, yeah, I definitely stand you there. And then it sounds like you also just recognized a need after being, in these other companies and these boring trainings. And you're like, let me find a solution. And I feel like that's something that a lot of us entrepreneurs do. We see a problem, we see an issue, and we want to solve it. So that's what you've done.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mm.
that it is. It really is. And I have found that while I didn't have role models that were business owners, intimately, and I started this not knowing what I was doing. I was like, now like, come on, Google. I don't want to have to, like I just wanted to get through one day without having to Google something, right?
Yeah.
But it has been such an incredible blessing. From the day one, there were opportunities for me to take risks. There were opportunities for me to step out on faith. And so I it has been such a transformative experience for me personally. And it has, when I was teaching, I realized about 10 years ago, I realized the power of being an introvert in those
Mm.
meetings. I finally figured it out. But working for myself has really helped me hone in on, okay, how can I use this? How can I use my powers for good? You know?
Mm.
And that I don't, I'm pretty confident I probably would not have figured that out had I still been working within an organization.
So what are some of those powers we have?
Yeah, because we got 'em. We got 'em. Right. So I always say it goes back to me being, the early years when I was an only child and, in the late 70s and 80s, I'm around all these adults, right? And so it was, well, I'm not about to engage in adult conversation, so I'll just sit and listen. And then it was, okay, I'm in school with these other kids that won't stop talking. I'm just going to listen. And for me, it was that listening that,
Mm.
yes, I was being quiet, but I was always listening as a child. Whereas now, well, when I was working within organizations, and there was a period where I was consistently frustrated with my colleagues who were, pontificating and just hearing their own voices. When I realized whenever I speak up, the room would go silent and all faces would turn. And I'm like, is it because I'm Black? Like, what is it? Right? Because I was the only face in the room, right? And I remember this one time in particular, this colleague of mine had contracts with National Geographic for years, right? So he was the biggest name in the room. And they were talking about some research things. And I saw an issue in what was being said. And I raised the concern, and they all literally, I said, well, I have some thoughts. And literally all the talking stopped, and people physically turned their bodies toward me. And I thought, like it was through a different lens that day. So then, I said what I said. They were like, "Oh, that's a great idea." No one repeated it, right? So there were none of those microaggressions that have a tendency to happen. And the meeting went on. And then later, this guy that I was mentioning, he said in the meeting, he goes, we've been talking about this issue, but I want to hear what Carrie has to say. And it was that day that I realized how much power as an introvert, I actually had. Because while other people were consistently talking, they really weren't listening.
Mm-hmm.
And so I use that in my work now with clients. When people come to me, I listen without judgment. I listen without making assumptions to what is it that they're saying they want. But I also listen for what people are not saying. I'm listening to the emotions. Like, okay, if they're talking about a topic, where do they get frustrated? Where do they seem to, get small and saddened? And and as I'm hearing those things, I'm able to make sense of it. And then whatever my response is, I always go back to those things that they have presented. And it's a skill. The more and more I tap into it, Shayla, I realize it's something that most people do not do. And so when I talk to someone, they're so taken, and I realize it's because they're not in situations where people are listening to them in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. As I'm listening to you, I'm like, am I talking to myself? Because you are saying exactly what happens to me. I think I was in my probably early 20s, like 22, at work when I realized that I had that power as well. Like when I would speak, everyone's listening because I'm normally not speaking. And so like they're like, oh, she's saying something. What is she saying? And yeah, and I was just so amazed that people listened and wanted my opinion because I don't know, I just felt like, okay, I'm young, I'm new to the workforce, and I'm working with a lot of older people who had way more experience, and then but now they want to hear what I have to say, and like wow. So yeah, and then I feel like that just made me realize like the responsibility that I had, and the I don't know how to explain it, but I wanted to protect that because I now I'm like, okay, every time I say something, I want to make sure that it's something important, it's something that I want people to hear since I know I'll have the audience for it.
Right.
Um but yeah, that is definitely a strength that we have as introverts is just our active listening skills because it's not just what people are saying because sometimes their body is saying something different than what their mouth is saying. And so we can pick up on that.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing that I've come to realize is as every year that passes, and actually every month that passes, when I find myself in different sorts of environments. So since COVID in the last 3 years, I've been an adjunct faculty member, um, and which I absolutely love. And I've had students say, "Oh, Dr. Graham, you like they comment." So I'm at an HBCU, so let me just say that. But they say, "We love how you talk," and I'm like, "Is it my northern accent that's coming out? Like, what is it?" And they'll say, "Well, just everything. You're really thoughtful with your words." Like they'll say, the accent and things like that. But then it gets to, "You're really thoughtful with your words." And it's to your point, Shayla, is we recognize the value and the strength of our words and the power that they hold, whether it's in being supportive and advocating for other people, but also the damage that can be done. And we see, I mean, it's pervasive in our society. We see that everywhere. And so that's one of the things that I think about a lot is if I'm in a new environment, and even if it's casual conversation, I'm exceptionally thoughtful about the words that I'm using and how I'm framing things. And I remember I got into a debate with a very close friend of mine who's an extrovert, and he's like, "Well, Carrie, are you code switching? Are you limiting what you want to say because of the environment?" And in fairness, I was like, "Well, I understand why you're asking me that." And so I had to sit with it and determine, well, what is really happening here? And I have resolved that for me, it's no, I'm tapping into who I truly am as an introvert, and it's being thoughtful with my words.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's something that I have thought about in the past, well, probably still in the present, because sometimes how you're having a conversation with someone and as you're speaking, you can see in their face that maybe something that you said um possibly offended them. And what I've learned is that my communication is often very direct. It comes across very direct to people, and I'm just, saying what I'm thinking, my thoughts, and I don't mean anything by it, but I'm just stating the facts. But unfortunately, to the person on the receiving end, they take it more harshly. And so that's something that I've realized that, okay, I have to be more careful with my words because what I'm saying does not sound offensive or it doesn't sound hurtful. I'm just stating something that happened. Um, but people take it the wrong way. And so, yeah, I definitely realize that I've had to be more careful with my words as well, even though I thought I was already careful, but um, but I just had to do it, be more mindful because people are listening so intently to what I say.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes I like to think that, as introverts, we are the masters of efficiency.
Hmm.
We use as few words as possible. So,
Hmm.
to your point, they're direct, they are concise, and yeah, we're just stating the facts. Like the sky is blue. Not, oh, the sky with rolling cloud. Like, no, it's
Right.
white clouds, blue sky. Um, but I have gotten to the point in my life where I view my me being an introvert as a nice warm coat or blanket. There was a point in my life where I'm like, I have to change this and
Yeah.
this this quality about me. Um, it's not good enough. It doesn't fit this environment. And now I'm just like, look, this is who I am. I'm okay with silence. I'm okay with
Yeah.
silence. It's okay. It's a beautiful thing actually to simply be in the moment. So I view it as a nice warm sweater.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. I think the issue becomes like other people who don't understand it. Like we can sit here and quiet and it's fine. It's nothing wrong with that. But other people think like it extroverts, they think the silence, it's a problem, something wrong, something is wrong with it. We need to fix it with a lot of just random noise and talking.
Yeah, it's funny when I got married a couple of years ago and my husband, like I would be on these either calls or,
Hmm.
whatever, where I was doing a lot of talking.
Hmm.
And I'd see him afterwards and he'd want to be talking. And I'm just
Yeah.
like, not trying to hurt his feelings, but I wanted to be like, dude, leave me alone. Like, I need some alone time. But
Yeah.
he's come to realize, and even, that that's what I need afterwards. Like, if there's a
Mhm.
day where I've been talking to people, pretty frequent, pretty consistently, he'll say, "Oh, okay, well, I'm gonna leave you to have some of your alone time." And I think at first there was this like, is it something wrong? Do we need to
Right.
talk about it and fix it? And now he's just like, okay, I realize you just need to be left alone. And it's true. Like now in learning that, that that's what I need, I value it. I'm like, yep, I got to talk to too many people today. I'm taking a
Yeah.
nap. I just want to shut it all down and take a nap.
Yeah. What else do you do to like recharge?
So there's that. I actually love sitting in the quiet.
Mm.
So if I walk, I don't use headphones, for
Mm.
safety, but also I just don't like the noise. I enjoy driving in silence.
Mm.
I'm okay with being in a room with literally nothing on. It's the silence for me because it's a way for me to quiet my mind. And if I can just quiet my mind, um, I feel restored. The other part of that, Shayla, is for me being around my loved ones. It is so important because we can go out to dinner and I'm just sitting there laughing and having a good time, but I don't have to talk.
Mhm.
Or if I am talking, like there's an equal balance of sharing the, talking time, so to speak. And so I really appreciate that part of my loved ones. My mom, she's still with me. And whenever I go home, she'll sit on one couch and I'll sit on the other and we'll just be sitting there not talking to each other, right? But we're enjoying each other's company. We might be watching something, or I'm sitting there and she's going about, daily activities. But it's so comforting to be around people they're okay with me being who I am.
Yeah, I love that. That reminded me of a past birthday. I invited three of my friends just to have dinner with me, and these friends did not know each other because I have a lot of individual friendships.
Yeah.
But what I was laughing about at the dinner is that the three of them were just chatting away like they knew each other forever. And I'm not saying much. And so if you were an outsider looking in, you would think that I did not know
Right.
all of them. But yeah, I did appreciate the fact that, they were just enjoying themselves and I could enjoy myself
Yep.
by just sitting there listening and eating my food.
That's right. That's right. I think another benefit of being an introvert is when we are in gatherings, or let me speak for myself. when I'm in a gathering, if there's someone else who isn't talking, I draw them out. And for example, I was invited to a get together of women, and we were seated at this long table, and this one young woman was there. She's the daughter-in-law of the host. She didn't say much, right? We were having very pointed conversations, but she rarely ever said anything. And I remember thinking, no, like, I know what that's like. I know what that's like to not know, like, how do I, it's like double Dutch, right? Like, how do I get in there? And so I said, well, and I spoke up so people would quiet. I said, well, I'm curious. Brittany, what do you think about X, Y, and Z? And she just kind of looked. And I think there was this nod to thank you for giving me an opportunity. And then her mother-in-law, the host, as I was saying, as we were leaving and saying goodbye, she gave me a hug and she said, Carrie, thank you so much for including her in the conversation. I always forget. And she's an extrovert. And so it's, people, I think so often that when there are gatherings, people think that, oh, well, the extroverts carry, the conversation. But the reality is sometimes the extroverts are unaware. And it's not a criticism, it simply is. They're unaware that someone needs help contributing or participating in the conversation.
Yeah, you brought that up, and I could talk for hours just on that alone. I often think about, like, with myself, my voice is softer than others, and so that's one of the issues when you're with a group of people and they have loud voices, like you try to cut in, but they don't even hear you. So it's
Right.
like, forget it. Never mind.
Yeah, absolutely. But I know how important that is, and particularly for women when you're
Mhm.
in those situations where I'm a firm believer that everyone deserves an equal opportunity to have their voice
Mhm.
heard, and no matter what the situation is. And so I make it my business to, when I find myself in a group of individuals, for those people who I know are more reserved, um,
Mhm.
I make a point to ask them their opinion and to draw others' attention to them. And it's not to put anyone on the spot. Like, I don't ever want to be offensive in that regard, but rather I want to invite people in. It's my
Okay.
way of inviting people in.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, Carrie. Well, I wish I could just talk to you for another hour or so.
This is great. This is great. Look, this is such a calm, easy conversation, right? Like, it's just
Good. It is. It is. Absolutely. And I just think about what were you saying? Yeah, I can't remember what made me think of this, but the fact that I am building a business about being an introvert, I think is just really cool. And
yeah.
so I'm really glad that I get to chat with people like you on a topic that is really near and dear to my heart. So I thank you so much for joining me today. Before we go, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to share where our listeners can find more information about you.
Yeah, they are always welcome to um, engage with me in conversation on LinkedIn. I post regularly and am always excited when people comment and we can go back and forth. That's the introvert in me, right? Like, yep, let's just do it over here. But for individuals that want to learn more about my work specifically, drcarriegraham.com, my website is the best place to go. And it's it's easy, right? Like that's the introvert in me is let's just make everything
Yes.
easy, easy and peaceful. So that's part of what I try to put out there as it relates to my business.
Wonderful, Carrie. So we'll check out your website and we'll find you on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for joining me today, Carrie.
Oh, Shayla, thank you so much. Thank you from all the introverts out there who are like, why can't we have a place, right? Like, thank you
Mhm.
for taking that hard step and putting yourself out there and inviting other introverts to join you because in the noise of all that's out there, we do need our quiet voices to be heard as well.
Yes, you're welcome. And thank you so much to our audience for listening. This has been another episode of the Building Her Dream podcast. If you've enjoyed it, why don't you go ahead and subscribe, leave us a review, and stay up to date with what we're doing by visiting www.buildingherdream.com.